I'm not going to bother with introductions because of our familiarity with each other.
Yes.
But we are doing this interview for Cinema Express, the cinema division of the New Indian Express. 9 years after the first interview that we did for Moscow in Kaveri.
Yes, indeed.
So what's the response been like for the film so far? What are you hearing from the...
A bunch of things. It's not been straightforward for sure. There's been a lot of flack for the kind of film it is, in the sense that it is there's a bunch of things that we've shown, portrayed in the film that are very new. And at the same time, on the other hand, every time I go to theatres, and you know that I've been doing rounds of theatres, and every time I go there, all I can hear is people roaring with laughter, people clapping out loud, having a jolly good time in the theatres, and the people seem to be enjoying it. But I think first day it was a little divided. The response was a bit mixed.
So it must seem quite strange for you, because when you go on the ground and you're witnessing these responses, where do you suppose this sort of mixed response is coming from?
I've been confused. See, I'm relatively inexperienced as a filmmaker, and I've been very confused. I'm like, what is it that we did so wrong when I look at the responses from one section, right? And I had a chat with Nag sir about it, and he said the same thing. He said, he gave me this almost father-like smile, elder brotherly smile, if I can say that. And he said, Rahul, I've been through this multiple times in my career. I've done a bunch of films where the minute the film came out, the responses were so mixed because it was fresh. We were trying something new, and it wasn't easy for people to immediately digest it. And then over time, those responses changed. With some films, it was a question of a week or sometimes 10 days when the response started changing. And with some others, it was a question of a few years when on television the films picked up and started doing better. And suddenly they were like, oh, this must be, this would have been a hit back then.
And I think Mr. Nagarjuna was mentioning that the same happened for Manmadhudu as well. He said it was a reasonable hit when it got released, but then it really became
It was a hit. It was an above average hit is what he told me. He said, but over time it became a classic. It became such a beloved film. It's a film that I love myself. It's a stress buster for me. I switch it on and sit and watch that film. Every time I'm a little exhausted or a little tired. But so just coming to terms with it, trying to understand it, process it. One thing's for sure, there's two sides to the film, right? There's a very naughty, cute side to the film, and I'd like to think we walked on a razor's edge and sort of kept it this side of the line. I don't think we ever got crass or we ever got vulgar. It was very cute, very naughty, shot in a classy way, and that's for about 15-20 minutes into the film, and then it's done. And then it's a very clean family entertainer, really. But yeah, like I said, I think there was an initial bit of a shock. And today, the second day that we're talking about, I'm beginning to see responses where, hang on a minute, it's a nice film, what are people talking about? It's sort of coming through slowly from the audiences. Right. And I've been seeing that in theatres from day one, really. See, the thing is, you go to a single screen, for example, or you go to a small town, for example, they're not going into the film with baggage. They're not going into the film with certain kind of expectations, or they're not going into the film thinking, oh, they've put this title on the film, or they're definitely not going into the film thinking, oh, this guy made Sheila so. However, in the cities, within the bubble that is social media, and I understand it, within the bubble that is social media, there's a certain kind of expectations from a film when a bunch of people get together and make a movie. Right. And I think we jolted people a little. Right. I don't think it fed to any of those expectations. It was a film by itself, and I think it was much different from anything that people expected or may have expected. So
right.
I respect it. I respect both. It's important as someone who's putting his work out there to understand, to deal with criticism as well as appreciation, and I respect it. I understand that somebody went in and expected something else and got something else, and they're a little jolted by it. I completely understand that. But I am thankful that audiences are still going to theatres, and the numbers are very good. Our team's very happy with the numbers, and we're hoping that it gets even better.
Before we can delve further into Manmadhudu 2, hearty congratulations on your national award.
Thank you. Thanks a ton.
So has that sunk in yet?
On and off. Suddenly I'm sitting somewhere talking to someone, I'm like, whoa, our film picked up a national award. And then suddenly someone asked me yesterday, so when do you actually get the award? And I said, I don't know, I'm yet to get a phone call, and at some point I'll have to go to Delhi and pick it up from the president. And I'm like, wait, president. Oh my God. So, and at other times, it's just not sunk in at all. That realization is yet to hit fully.
And it must have seemed very strange to receive the news on the day of the release of your second film.
Fantastic, actually. Fantastic. I mean, here I was, there was a lot of nervous excitedness. We were going around doing interviews and going to theaters, and in the middle of all this boom, this announcement came out, and truly honored. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank every single person in my team that worked on the film. And indeed all the other winners from Telugu cinema. It's been a rich haul for Telugu cinema this year. Very, very proud of this industry. As an industry, we've been putting out very good work for the last 4 or 5 years, and that's being recognized now, and very glad about it. And to all the winners around the country.
And because I'm a bit familiar with the journey that you have undertaken as a filmmaker, first you were an actor, then you turned a director. I think I must register that it's quite astonishing that you came into the Telugu industry without being able to speak a word of the language. Yes. About 7 years back, was it?
Yes.
Right.
I signed my first film about 8 years back. It released about 7 years.
And now to be getting a national award for screenplay for a Telugu film.
Right.
So how welcoming has the industry generally been? How important, how quickly did you take to the language? How did you overcome those initial hiccups?
The industry, for my first film, those 3 characters, I think, in that film, Andhra Rakshasi, were very beloved, especially over time. It's done very well on satellite, much like Manmadhudu. And over time on television, it's become a bit of a cult film. And I think it's the lovely characters that my director wrote. That sort of opened doors for all 3 of us. It gave us a career, it gave us a life here, and people were very welcoming. The character that I played in that film, Gautam, I think it was a very, very well written character, and especially a lot of the girls and the women seemed to love that guy, Gautam, and big thanks to him. So the industry was very, very welcoming, not one bit keeping in mind that I wasn't from here, that I came from outside. And it's that reception and that welcome that I got that made me decide that I'd shift bag and baggage. And it made a lot of practical sense. I'd done 2-3 Tamil films at that point, wasn't really making any headway. And I was getting offers on and off, but Andhra Rakshasi sort of took me to another space, put me on a better platform, and I said, made most sense to shift bag and baggage. And I liked the 1 year that I was working on Andhra Rakshasi. I loved Hyderabad, loved the vibe about the city, loved the people here. And I realized Telugu people in both the states just love their cinema, unlike any other state that I've been in. Incredible passion for cinema. So I said, let's make the switch. And at that point, I think as I was making the film itself, my first concern was that I wanted to dub for myself. Right. It's a character that I loved playing. So I remember my first film, there's a rule on the set that nobody was allowed to talk to me in English, Hindi, Tamil, whatever it is that they knew. And I said, no, speak to me in Telugu. It doesn't matter if I don't understand, I eventually will. And I used to make it a point to speak to them in Telugu, even if it was broken, even if I was making mistakes at that point. Because the only way to overcome the fear of making mistakes is by making mistakes. Right. So that helped, and eventually my makeup man and my assistant and my all in all, Anu, my hairstylist, also Hanu, were my 2 teachers, so to speak. He's from Guntur, Hanu, and my makeup man Babuna's from Telangana.
Okay, so that covers the...
So my Telugu is very hybrid. Right. And a lot of the Telugu I speak is what I learned from watching films and TV serials. Right. I used to watch TV serials because it's easier to learn a language watching TV serials, because there's an expression for every word. So it's easy to understand what they're saying. Right. So yeah, that's sort of how and I think it's also got to do with genetics. My mom passed on good genes to me when it came to languages. In
talking about the reception to Manmadhudu, you mentioned that certain people walk in with expectations of what they think they want to see in this film. Do you think it's a natural consequence of the film being titled Manmadhudu to what sort of influence do you...
For sure, clearly. Most of the reviews...
Is it almost unfair that people keep thinking about Manmadhudu when they watch this film? At least a section of the people seem to do that.
We titled the film Manmadhudu, so I can't put the blame on the media or the people. When we chose to go with that title, yes, we understood. Somewhere we believed, Nag sir, myself, and the entire team, we believed that it was a film fresh enough, original enough for people to be able to forget. We didn't even want to favorably be compared to that film, but we thought 10 minutes, 15 minutes into the film, they'd be able to forget the original film, Manmadhudu, and watch this film for what it is. And somewhere, it is a double-edged sword in the sense that calling the film Manmadhudu 2 did give us a certain amount of buzz, a certain amount of hype. It did bring in incremental crowds on a Friday to theatres. And at the same time, obviously, you have to face the fact that they're going to come in with expectations, with huge expectations. It's a beloved film. There's so much nostalgia attached. So I don't have any regrets, honestly. I mean, it's a learning experience. We've all learned a few things. We've learned what the positives were. Nag sir is a man who's seen it all. He knows what he's doing. So, and he said the same thing. He said, yes, there are advantages and disadvantages. So, yeah, we chose to go with it. I can't turn around and blame people for it. However, we did take the pains to mention in every interview saying it's got nothing to do with that Manmadhudu. It's nothing like that film. It's a very different film. Please judge it for what it is. So I think that is beginning to happen from day 2, day 3 onwards, that people are beginning to judge the film for what it is.
Starting to see this film for what it is.
For what it is. Right. I think your first day crowd is also largely a crowd that sort of, is the cinema passionate crowd that comes there to see, so they gave it this title, let's see what they've done with it. I think after that point, it's your crowd that comes in to just have fun. They don't care about anything else. They're not looking to judge the film. They only want to know if they'll have a good time in the theatres. And I think they're beginning to have a good time in the theatres, so that's helping us.
Right. After a fairly small film like Chila So, what were some of the revelations in being part of this project? What were some of the biggest adjustments you had to make?
Huge. The learning curve has been huge, very, very steep. In the sense that when I made Chila So, I think the biggest difference in terms of my approach to these two films is that when I made Chila So, here was a story that was running out of my head for almost 10 years, and all I wanted to do was get a chance to make it. And when I finally did get a chance to make it, I went and made it exactly the way I saw it in my head. I'd been seeing it in my head for years. I never once stopped in my tracks and said, okay, will the audience want to see something here, or do I need to include comedy here? I included comedy where I felt the film needs to have comedy, where I felt, yes, the characters need to go here now, I need to bring Kishore's character back into the film, and things like that. With this film, the approach changed completely. From the word go, the approach became, how do we tailor this script, keeping in mind that we need to entertain the audiences throughout, right? Keeping in mind that we're trying to make, for example, Chila So has certain drastic tonal shifts, right? And for me, I wanted all those. For me, life is like that. Sometimes you can spend a night and a bunch of things can happen. You could be laughing, cracking jokes with your friend, and half an hour later you could be in the middle of a crisis, and then half an hour later that could be solved. And life's like that. And I sort of wanted that to come through. I wanted these two characters in Chila So to experience a gamut of emotions in that one night, right? There was a lot of drastic tonal shifts, but when it came to this film, we were very clear that from start to finish, we wanted to keep it very smooth, keep it very light-hearted, to the point that, I told myself that keep it flaky almost if you have to. The imagination can come in how you conceive a scene, but it has to be flaky. It has to be light-hearted is something we were very clear about. So I think that was the biggest difference, the approach. That here I was just trying to tell a story the way I knew how to, and here it was trying to sort of, okay, the audiences might need this and this, and you need to make a film that's interesting enough for them to want to come to a theatre, spend money and watch the film. So I think that approach was...
And what adjustments did you have to make in terms of accommodating a star like Mr. Nagarjuna into a project? Because that must have been a fairly new experience for you as well.
I think that side of it, see, it's not a... Yes, we shot it in a commercial format. It's made in a very different meter. There's humor where there needs to be humor. There's songs and all that. However, it's not a masala film, if you know what I mean. Right? There aren't punch dialogues for the sake of punch dialogues. Nowhere are we milking Nag sir's actual real life persona. Right? The characterization of Sam is sort of consistent from start to finish. So in that sense, not so much. I think that's another leap I'll have to take at some point when I get to make a proper masala film with your punch dialogues, and we are making it for the fans. Here we weren't making it for the fans, we were making it for audiences, right? So in that sense, the only adjustments, first of all, it was a story that was handpicked by Nag sir. He watched the French original, he loved the film, and the think tank felt that it'd be right for him. I watched the film, I thought it'd be perfect for him. I thought we could do a lot to suit Nag sir into that character of Sam. And once I began writing, it was only that. Yes, we had to keep audiences in mind, but Nag sir never once asked me to keep his image or his fans in mind. He said, I'm doing something new, and my fans are used to that from me. They know that I keep experimenting once in a while, that I keep trying to reinvent myself once in a while, and hopefully they like that about this film. So that was in fact, the only brief he gave me was, he said, at this stage in my career, I'm attempting this genre. Before anybody makes fun of us, I want us to make fun of us. I want us to make fun of me, he said. He said, be brutal, no holds barred, don't hold back. Go ahead, write as many lines as you want making fun of me. Put it in there and then put it in the very first teaser that goes out. Right. Was his only clear instruction. Right. So he's a man that thinks in terms of the story and what the story needs. So yeah, I think that's another experience I'm going to have at some point when I go make a masala film.
And while you were talking about Mr. Nagarjuna in this film, you mentioned that you probably foresee yourself making a proper masala film sometime.
Sure, I'd love to at some point.
So does the national award winning director have a lot of interest in making that sort of film as well?
For me, it's more about stories. I read something or I meet someone and they told me their life experience, or I travel and I have a life experience, or one of my close friends has a life experience. Those are things that interest me, right? And I pick up a line here or I pick up a line, hey, wait, that's an interesting thought. Can I weave a story around it? Those are the kind of things I usually jot down on my notepad. And there are a couple of ideas there that lend themselves to the masala format. And I'm a big fan of a well-made masala film with its heart in the right place. Nothing like it, right? The kind of joy and the rush and the high it gives you, nothing like it. So just because my first film was of a certain kind, and the fact that it's been awarded a very prestigious award, the national award no less, doesn't mean that I don't want to go explore that side of it. But so sure, I think that's another thing I learned from this film, that you need to be a loyal servant of your material. You pick a material and then you can't be worried about, but then I made a sensible first film. I can't do these things. People will think suddenly I'm not sensible enough or anything. No, each film speaks to a different set of audiences, and you need to be honest to that, right? Which is kind of what I've done with Manmadhudu, which I think for people who watched Sheila, so they were like, but where is the emotional depth? But we weren't trying to have emotional depth. It's not that kind of a film. In fact, we actively avoided emotional depth until the last 10-15 minutes of the film. So yeah, I think you should go out there and try everything. I don't want to get slaughtered for sure. I want to go have a ball, have fun making all kinds of films. Right. To me, is that story interesting enough for me to want to tell it? That's important.
And speaking of emotional depth, even though this film is a comedy, and I've seen the film, right. I did think that the emotional beats of the film were fairly impactful, right. Despite the fact that it was surrounded by comedy and people looking to lighten the material. Right. So how were you able to achieve the emotional gravitas of? Is it hard for you to create emotional gravitas in a film like this, where you're constantly looking to create laughs?
For me, it's the characters, right? For me, it's the characters, and very early on, you have to understand what your film's about. And very early on, I knew I was making a film, setting the original French film aside. I knew I was making a film about a man who loses the ability to have an emotional connect with women, because all his life he's been raised by women and only women, right? And at some point he sort of, like a spring, he goes to the other extreme and says, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to have any emotional connect with women. So his only needs from women are physical. And yet because he was raised by a family of women, he knows how to respect them. He's nice to them. He treats them right. No woman who comes home with him ever goes back feeling disrespected or ill-treated, right? He knows how to treat them right. But his only needs from them are physical, and he makes it very clear to them. He's not the sort to mislead a woman who might want more tomorrow and take her home, right, just to satisfy his needs. So I knew that it was a story about a man who's lost his ability to make an emotional connect with women to the point where he regains that ability, right? He regains that emotional connect with the women in his life, in his family. He understands the value of them, and he understands what they've done for him, and thereby sort of regaining the ability to make an emotional connect with a woman outside of his family, which in this case is Avantika, right? So I was very clear it was a film about that. Now, once that map was set, I then started filling in comedy here and there. I said, okay, hang on a second, have we gone 10-15 minutes without humor in the film? Nag sir was also gently pushing me in that direction, saying, Rahul, you've sort of gone for a phase in the film where it's dry, you need more humor here. So then I started asking myself questions as to, okay, my character's in this sort of an emotional state of mind, how can I put him in a funny situation and milk it for comedy? So I think the emotion sort of fell in place first, And then the comedy came later. So it wasn't the other way around. So writing the emotional scenes wasn't really tough. I sort of already had that graph in mind. And if you look at the film, I don't remember if I was consciously experimenting, but the kind of film we wanted it to be, a lot of the emotional scenes come bang in the middle of a funny portion.
Right.
Or a lot of the comedy scenes come bang in the, like for example, Lakshmi Garu's conversation with Nag sir very early in the film, where she says, ప్రతి ఒక్కరికి జీవితంలో ఒక తోడు ఉండాలిరా, ఒంటరిగా బతకడం బాగుంటుందేమో కానీ మెల్లగా అది ఒంటరితనంగా మిగిలిపోతుందిరా అంటారు. ఆ సీన్ చుట్టూ ఒక కామెడీ సీన్ ఉంటుంది. ఫస్ట్ కిషోర్తో ఒక కామెడీ సీన్ ఉంటుంది. అలానే ఇన్ ద సెకండ్ హాఫ్ వెన్ రావ్ రమేష్ సార్ అండ్ లక్ష్మి గారు స్టార్ట్ హ్యావింగ్ అ కాన్వర్సేషన్ అరౌండ్ దట్ ఇస్ దట్ హోల్ వీడ్ సీన్ అండ్ there's a lot of comedy going around. So in that sense,
actually laughing aloud while, I mean, she's actually laughing aloud while discussing.
When I was writing it, I thought it was a nice way to portray someone's emotions where they're in a state of mind because of the weed where they're not able to cry. Right. They've been laughing, and yet I wanted to show that she's crying deep within. Right. That it is hurting her, that it is affecting her. And I thought it'd be a nice way to sort of bring about that contrast. And that's the sort of flavor of the film as such. I didn't want the film to get too serious anywhere, and yet wanted to convey that emotion. So
and you spoke about Sam being fairly respectful, right, to all the women he has a fling with. Right. Which I find to be very interesting, mainly because typically films about playboys, films about such men become about their conquests. Right. The women more or less almost seem to get relegated to being objects that he has to convince to have sex with him. So how important was it for you to show him being very respectful of the women he was dealing with? More importantly, how difficult was it to show a woman to create a respectful male who is a playboy?
This is what I believe, right? I could be wrong, completely off about it, but this is what I believe. I think your Casanovas or playboys or whatever you want to call them, let's say a man who is not committed to one woman and who has a bunch of flings, the only guys who actually get to have that many flings are ones who know how to respect women. I don't think you're going to be able to be smooth with women if you don't have that natural grain of respect for women, right? I don't think a guy who's sort of treating women like conquests is going to end up getting too many women. Is something I believe. I could be completely wrong about it. And for me, that's how it always was. That's how I saw Sam from the very beginning. I sort of remember mentioning this in another interview that this didn't happen when I was writing it. But when I started shooting the film, I stopped to myself. There's a book that I love. That book left a large impact on me when I read it. Herman Hesse's Narcissus and Goldmund. Right. And I wondered how much of Goldmund crept into my screenplay when I was writing Sam. I thought then that maybe without realizing it, I'd sort of tried to write a Goldmund. Goldmund's got this beautiful take on life. He loves women. He's never with one woman for more than a limited period of time. And yet, he says, I remember he comes back to the monastery and he has a chat with Narcissus and he says, there are all kinds of them. All you need to do is keep your senses alive, keep your antennae sort of tuned in, and you'll know what they want. And there is a joy in making them happy, in understanding what they want. It could be emotional, it could be in bed, right, to put it plainly. But there's a joy in being able to be alive to what they want, understanding it without them having to say it to you, and to be able to make them happy. Now, I haven't gone this in-depth in the film. I mean, I couldn't afford to. Right. But I'd like to think he's sort of like Goldman, and it was very, very important for me. Right. I definitely didn't want to go write a film or make a film where, you know, I'm writing this playboy character into the script and he treats his women like conquests, because my heart wouldn't be in it. And which is why I think we went and made a very progressive film. Which is why some of the backlash, I understand it. I understand that you're a product of your circumstances. I understand that, you know, your thinking, your worldviews are governed by the kind of people who surround you and your cultural environment. However, I feel a little bad that we actually went and made a very progressive film and we have a bunch of people saying, oh, so really, this is your idea of feminism? We thought you were a feminist, or we thought you're a sanskari. I'm like, when did I exactly say that I'm a sanskari? I said I'd like to think I'm a woke progressive man, although it's become such an over-abused word now. Right. But I'd like to think I'm a woke progressive man. And I keep learning too. I keep learning. When I look back, 3 years back, I don't think I was as progressive as I am now. And I'm sure 3 years later I'll be far more progressive than I am now. But as long as we at least understand, we're fine. And that was very important for me, the way I wrote Sam. I had to keep that in mind.
Right, and I remember in one scene in the film when Venala Kishore's character uses the word padayatam. That aptly summarizes what you, I suppose, you were looking to achieve with this
Absolutely.
film. When Sam says he does not like that word.
Venala Kishore basically says, అయినా అంత ఫాస్ట్గా ఎలా పడేస్తారు సార్ అమ్మాయిల్ని అండ్ శామ్ సెస్ పడేయటం ఏంట్రా ఆ మాట అంటేనే చిరాకు నాకు దట్స్ హిస్ టేక్ ఆన్ లైఫ్ హీ డజంట్ ట్రీట్ దెమ్ లైక్ ఈస్ పడేయటమింగ్ దెమ్ యు నో వాట్ ఐ మీన్ ఫర్ lack of English word for it but yeah, that's his take on it. And I think he's, without saying, at least that was my intention when I wrote the line, without saying it, he's saying that don't treat them like conquests and they'll come to you.
Right.
If you treat them like that, they're not going to come to you. That's probably the difference between Kishore and Nagsar in the film. Kishore sort of has a more simplistic idea of it, right. And all he wants to do is get the woman he loves, and Nagsar knows how to do it. So yeah.
Right. And talking about Kishore, he was an integral part of Chela So as well,
right.
And now this film as well.
Right.
It appears that he is a vital cog in you making a film.
He's my muse. He's an integral part of my life, not just my 2 films that I've made so far. It's such a, I can't forget the shooting part of it. Obviously, it's a lot of fun shooting a fun comedy scene with Kishore, but writing a scene for Kishore, writing a line for Kishore is such a joy for me personally, because I know him so well. As I'm writing it, I know exactly how he's going to act it out. I know exactly the expressions he'll have on his face, and I know how much I need and how much I don't. Right? I know that this line will be enough because Kishore will deliver it in such a way, and I know how much he'll improvise.
So you're saying this personal connection you have with him really helps you understand what he can bring to the table in a film as well.
Absolutely. You know, good reviews, bad reviews, all that aside, there is one thing that was common to every single review that both my first film as well as my second film got, which is that Kishore was fabulous in the film.
Right.
And I think that comes from the fact that I understand him so well that when I write, there's joy in writing for Kishore. And I know how much room to leave for his improvisations, because his improvisations are phenomenal. Right. And by the time we started doing our second film, I think he also got exactly what improvisations I would like and which ones I would ask him to rein in. So I think there's a beautiful equation there that we have as filmmaker and actor, and I just hope it keeps getting better. He's my muse.
You mentioned feminism some time back. And let's talk about Avantika, the character in this film. She drinks, she smokes, and she does what she does unapologetically. Right? And there seems to be a tendency for many people to immediately wonder if this is what feminism means. You know,
it's even worse. They're not even wondering if this is what feminism means. They're like, oh, you said you're a feminist, but you'll make your girl do all this, your actress do all this. Right. I'm like, that is the whole point of it.
How you deal with these sort of responses? Do you want to engage with them? Do you see why they say what they do?
I'd love to engage with people. I'd love to throw my 2 bits into the conversation and see if, you know, I'm able to make people see something from a different perspective. I'd love to.
Right.
But social media is not the right platform for it. I mean, you're almost always misinterpreted. You're almost always misunderstood, and you're not talking to someone face to face. They can't see with what emotion you're saying something. It's a bunch of words, and you get to interpret it the way you want depending on your current mood and your state of mind. So often I feel social media is not the right platform for it, and yet sometimes if I really feel the need to say something, I go out and write a blog and then I put it up. But
and the objective of this question for me was to allow an opportunity for you to explain why you do not think that a woman smoking or drinking or doing whatever it is that she wants, without it affecting other people, of course, is against the rules of feminism.
Thank you for that, because I haven't gotten a chance to do this. My take on feminism is simple, right? All I'm saying is, let them make their own rules. Let us make our own rules, right? As men, we get to make the rules for how we want to live life. And it's not even about men and women, it's about an individual. I believe in the freedom of an individual to do as he or she pleases, as long as you are not directly affecting someone. That has been my mantra in life. That's my credo, my motto. And for me, as long as you're not directly hurting or affecting someone, you're fine doing what you want to do. Now, not for a second am I saying smoking is great and drinking is great, women should smoke. I'm not saying that at all.
Right.
All I'm saying is, every time a man lights up a cigarette, nobody bats an eyelid. He's not judged for being bad or asanskari or whatever it is. Why is it that we use very different parameters to judge a woman? I'm not for a second saying smoking is right or drinking is right. All I'm saying is there are people I know in this world, women who exist, who smoke and drink for the same reasons that men do, right? Men smoke and drink because they can't kick the habit. It's as simple as that. Nobody thinks it's a great habit to have. Everybody knows it's bad. Everybody knows it's dangerous. Everybody knows it's harmful. And yet, it's difficult to quit. And there are women out there who smoke for exactly the same reasons. Women are not smoking to make a statement. And if you notice, I've sort of dealt with it in exactly the same way. Avantika's never making a statement. In fact, I was very particular. In the very first scene that you see her smoking, she takes a drag and she's lost in thought. She's not doing it stylishly, or I haven't put an electric guitar on it. In fact, I go silent there, if you notice. And what thought it is that she's lost in, you realize a few scenes later when she goes to the foster home. Right. So for me, this is who she is. Yes, she smokes, she drinks. If you think smoking and drinking is bad, I completely agree with you. But don't say it's bad because it's a girl doing it, is all I'm saying. Right. So my intention really was to write a character. Now, when I wrote Anjali in Sheila Sau, it was received with such warm feedback. Everybody loved that girl. Because even though she's independent, even though she's got the sense of self-esteem and self-worth, she carries the cross of her circumstances, right? She's burdened by her circumstances, yes, because of which she fits into a certain type that is comfortable for people to digest. Right, exactly. So when a girl like that goes through a gamut of emotions, people love her, right? So to speak, say Ramya Krishnan Garu's character in Narasimha, right, and Soundarya Garu's character in Narasimha, if you were to take it as two prototypes, unfortunately it's never like that. Everybody's in between. Nobody's ever a Ramya Krishnan Garu's character in Narasimha and Soundarya Garu's character in Narasimha. But if you had to take those two prototypes, the minute I wrote a self-dependent, independent woman like Soundarya Garu, people loved it. The minute I write a self-dependent, emotional, kind-hearted, responsible person, but made her like Ramya Krishnan Garu, it's suddenly they're like, oh, so you're a feminist, but you'll write a character like this. And I think it's far more feminist than writing a Soundarya Garu is. So in that sense, Avantika, my intention was to write this girl who has a bunch of flaws that everybody calls flaws, that people think a woman shouldn't be like. And yet, to make them fall in love with Avantika by the end of the film. To me, I said, I don't want them to discuss it. I don't want them to process it consciously that, hang on a second, I'm falling in love with a girl who smokes, who drinks, who wears clothes a certain way. I didn't even want them to process it consciously, but I just wanted them to fall in love with Avantika at the end of the film. Just like I wanted them to fall in love with Sam by the end of the film. So, to me, when people are coming out today and saying Rakul's done a fabulous job and they loved Avantika, I feel a great sense of joy in that has been achieved. Unfortunately, there is also a certain section that's not, mind you, pointing fingers at Avantika, that's pointing fingers at me for having written a character like that. I guess I'll take it. But I just hope someday, few years down the line, even those people see that we actually wrote a very progressive girl. And feminism is about letting women make their own rules. You don't make the rules for them. And in my film, I let Avantika make her own rules. That's all I did. I didn't judge her for her habits. In fact, I got the foster care agent to say, you have a smoking habit, we can't give you the child. Yes. And that's true. Who will want to entrust a child with someone with a smoking habit? But it should be the same for a man as well, is my point. So yeah, thank you for giving me that opportunity. I hope I made, I'm able to change at least the points of view of, or point of views of at least a few people with this interview.
Were there any concerns that consensual sex that your male character has could be seen as vulgarity on some level? Because that seems, I'm noticing some people having a problem with that as well. Do you think sex being so taboo in our society as a topic of discussion, do you think it's a consequence of that? Do you think that also needs changing?
I don't think people love their sex in their films, right? We are a very repressed society sexually, culturally speaking. We've been like that for decades. People love sex in their films, but it needs to be in a certain grammar. Right? That's one thing I've understood. The minute you're zooming in on somebody's navel or waistline, and the minute you have a hero coming in, some non-existent fragrance in their waistline, and then the minute there are some certain typical steps that we're used to in a song, people don't feel uncomfortable. We actually shot it in a very cute, classy, Friends sort of a way, if you've seen the TV show Friends. Yes. It's shot typically like a makeout scene or a kissing scene in Friends. And And the music is not one bit titillating. If you look at the shot division, it's not one bit titillating. I don't zoom in anywhere. In fact, none of the women in any of those scenes are taking their clothes off. Right. I'm not milking it for titillation. If anything, it's Naxar's shirt getting ripped, not the other way around. Right. So, and it's all mids and wides. I'm not putting a close on anything. So it's definitely, I beg to differ respectfully with anybody who says we shot it in a certain way, and actually that's not been the feedback. I mean, if I'm making a film about a Casanova, I'm saying that he has a double life, where he leads a life as a Casanova and has a bunch of flings with people. How can I not shoot even one making out scene? It doesn't make sense. You have to show, not tell, right? That is why cinema exists as a medium. If I had to just tell, I should go do a radio play, right, not make a film. So right. I think we made those scenes honestly, and I don't think even the censor board didn't have a problem with any of Naxar's kisses. I see. So yeah, I don't know. I think hopefully, probably considering the title and things like that, people didn't expect it, which is why we very clearly put it out in the very first teaser so that people come prepared for it. So in that sense, I think people came a little prepared for that.
While talking about the censors and kissing, I noticed that one other scene in your film got blurred out.
Yes.
And that I think is the scene that you're referring to when you talk about some people having a problem with it. Yes.
It was a very sweet and cute scene. The minute it got blurred out, it looked really weird even to me. So we had to send out our domestic copy the next day morning, early morning, and that evening we got the censor cuts, and the only option, because I didn't have another shot, so the only option I was left with was to take a blur. And the official said they weren't comfortable with it, and fair enough. I mean, we have rules. I'm willing to live by the rules. This is not a scene about homosexuality, right, or it's not two homosexuals. Right. It's meant to be a cute and funny comedy scene, right? So they said, no, they have a problem with it. And I said, okay, now I understand why they said they have a problem with it. They said, you will get into trouble. And now I understand why. However, just by the fact that we blurred it, made it look for what it wasn't. By blurring it, it suddenly became awkward. And it was too late for us to do anything about it. So I said, okay, can't help it now. Now let me explain. A lot of people asked me, people who genuinely liked the film, even they came and asked me why I would write a scene like that. So all I can do is explain my perspective, right? And then it's up to people to take it. I watched the French film, right? And I watched the film only once. And after that, I started writing my screenplay and never revisited the film. And I've retained only about 8, 9, maybe 10 scenes from the original. Those were scenes I remembered in that one viewing. And for some reason, they stuck. I liked them, they stuck. And those scenes were the reason I got interested in the film in the first place. And one of those scenes was this, where that girl says something and says, okay, don't worry, let me try something else. And he says, what? And she goes and she kisses the other woman, the same character in the original film. And when I was watching it, I laughed out loud. I thought it was a really cute, funny thing. I laughed out loud and I didn't see it coming. It completely took me by surprise. Right. And I said, nice, I like that. You know what, I'm going to retain that in my film. And they don't extend it beyond that. It stops with the kiss in the original French film. I saw it as an opportunity to push the envelope a little further and talk about a 52-year-old woman having sexual desires. And I think it's progressive. Unfortunately, people seem to think I'm regressive for it. But I thought it's perfectly progressive. That why is it that if I can talk about a middle-aged man having sexual desires, nobody bats an eyelid. People are okay with it because it's a man. It's understandable. But for some reason, I've committed some sin when I talk about the sexuality or the sexual desires of a woman of that age. And I felt having that scene in the film, which I wrote only with the intention of retaining a scene that I loved in the original. I thought it was really cute and funny. And we shot it in a very cute and funny manner. We didn't shoot it in a manner where, we were trying to titillate. At least I'd like to believe that. And from there, just as a mini extension, I had this bit in where she then drags her husband to the bedroom. Yes. So that's why. That was my perspective.
You spoke about Avantika not particularly being attacked, but that you as a writer for writing Avantika have been facing a few attacks.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you how much of people's perception of you as a person, dictated by your social media behavior, affects their perception of you, and their perception of you as a filmmaker and the products that you create.
Ideally, it shouldn't, and I'd like to think it didn't, because till I made this film, I was known by both groups, by the woke group as well as people who don't understand this sort of context in which we're having this discussion. Not a lot of people are going to get it. They're probably going to look at it and hate me even more. And they're going to say, what the hell is this guy talking? But both groups until now always thought on social media that I was this guy who respected women, that he's very respectful, and he's always spoken about women's rights and things like that. And one group today feels, and as an extension to that, he's gone and written a very progressive character. And another group feels, he said these things and look at him now, what a hypocrite. I'm scratching my head. I think one of the biggest issues for people who watched and loved Chila Sav is that they expected a Chila Sav from this film.
Right.
Now, thankfully, I've broken that already. So the third time I come out with something that's not like a Chila Sav, hopefully they won't be shocked. I'm happy. I'm happy that it's not a film that's not getting talked about. I'm happy that it's not a film that's not made a noise. I'm happy that it's a film that's at least being discussed. And hopefully in that discussion, at least 4 or 5 people will read the other side of the argument and change their opinion. So I'm happy if that happens.
So you're saying you're quite heartwarmed by the idea that people are able to empathize with this type of woman.
Absolutely.
Because it's, interestingly enough, the Tamil remake of Pink, Nerkonda Parvai, it's also facing a certain criticism about the central 3 women and the problems that they undergo. Lots of people are talking about how it's hard to empathize with them. So on some level, it seems like you're stating the opposite with how your film is being received by certain people.
So I'm really happy that a film like Nerkonda Parvai has been made. I'm really happy that a superstar like Ajit sir agreed to do the film, because it will reach sections of audiences that we want watching a film like Pink. It's a film that opens your heart to empathy, right? And I'm glad to see at least a certain section it's happening. And having said that, Manmadhudu 2 is not a film that tries to preach all this. It's nearly not as important a film as Pink or Nerkonda Parvai. It's not discussing issues. Whatever little things that I believe in, my own belief systems, have just been smuggled in very, very unintrusively into the film. It's almost not meant to be discussed. It's not meant to be processed consciously by the audiences as well. It's just made with a certain sensibilities, but it's a light-hearted, flaky, fun film. And it shouldn't be taken any more seriously than it's meant to be. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this conversation. Best wishes for the film and congratulations on your national award.
Gee, one big compliment that I have to give you is we started this interview on a very awkward note because of the familiarity. But somewhere deep down you showed why you're a pro. It became an interview. Suddenly it didn't feel like I was talking to my best friend. So yeah, so thank you. I had a lovely time. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to discuss certain things that I felt did need to be discussed once the films come out and it's being consumed by people. So thank you. My pleasure.